Having cycled Anturas Moor, a mostly off-road route from Glasgow railway station in the middle of the city right up to Cape Wrath in the northwest, we wanted to do the southern leg of the route, which is from Derby, or just north of Derby, Wirksworth, up to Glasgow. And come August 2026, it seemed an ideal time to go and do it. Trains took us from Dent down to Derby, and then we set off north looking for a wild camp.
Hopefully we'll find a nice spot to camp in here. Old limestone quarry.
And it was a perfect place for our first night. Quiet and calm, no disturbances at all. The high peak trail gave good going, easy gradients, a good surface, and we made good time, and Trish set a cracking pace. Back on the road, our route became more undulating, and we upped and downed in the lovely warm sunshine. But with the temperature hovering around 33, 34 degrees, even the sheep were staying in the shade. But after a good start, the bridleway up to South Head became very, very rough, and for Trish it was almost impossible to cycle. I managed much of it, but the uphill sections were too much for me, and the downhills were too much for Trish. But it did take us to a wonderful camp spot high up on the southwest flank of Kinder Scout, where we could view the eclipse for later on tonight. We had a lovely wild camp right beside the trail, and it was a very quiet spot, and we got good views of the eclipse, low planes coming into Manchester Airport silhouetted, and later on we saw a fairly good view, but only through my camera, and it was surprisingly bright actually, given that it was a 92% totality. Having enjoyed a lovely descent on tracks and roads down to Hayfield, the inevitable climb began, and we were up and down all day, giving a good height gain. Some of the ups were rough and steep, and poor Trish couldn't manage to cycle them, and neither could I. And it was interesting to see the very, very low water in some of the reservoirs as we climbed up towards the middle of the Pennines. A steep descent took us down towards the M62, and we passed under it in a tunnel before a strange section beside it led to an incredibly steep climb. Up and up, another push for Trish. The towpath beside the Rochdale Canal gave blissfully easy going before, of course, an inevitable climb took us up and out of the valley, up into the Highlands again. A steady climb from Hebden Bridge took us up to a 390 metre col before we zoomed down into Col. And some much easier going beside the Leeds-Liverpool Canal, where we pitched our tent for a very quiet night. The climb out of Ribblesdale eventually led to Lingill via Birkwith, Olding and Calf Holes, the scene of my very first caving trips back in 1980. It was strange, I hadn't been back since. Easier climbing took us up to Gale Wolds and our highest camp at 550 metres, very, very close to the source of the River Ribble. Thanks, Mike, for that information. Here we had pasty and baked beans for supper. Lovely. You can just see the Howgills over there and Winder on the left. This is heading down the coal road. Approaching Dufton, we caught our first glimpses of the High Pennines, Great Dunfell rising ahead, which we knew we'd be climbing tomorrow. And boy, was it a steep and misty climb, in places far too steep for Trish, who had to push her bike up. We thought the descent to Alston might be easy, but actually how wrong we were. We dropped down the valley of the Troutbeck, and it was hard going, having to haul the bikes over numerous side streams, boggy moors, rounded roaded sections, and it was a very, very tough section. In fact, we met a German guy here who came up behind us, and he said it was the hardest trail he'd been on since he started his tour in Crete. Thankfully,
Let's go
after that
straight
hard
through,
going,
I'll
we had
lock
an
it.
easy section on the South Tyndale Railway, which was really pretty, very, very beautiful in places, apart from a few bridges we had to go right round on detours, which was very annoying. Having climbed out of Holtwhistle, we entered Hadrian's Wall country, but soon after we were heading into the forests of Kielder, where the rain came down and the trails gave good going though. We made good time despite the wind. The strong and gusty northwesterly wind was pushing large waves down Kielder Water as we rounded its southern shore on lovely bike trails to a very midgy camp. Midgy in the morning anyway, after the wind had declined. Hilly going took us over to the village of Denholm, where we had a lovely cafe stop and gorged ourselves on all manner of goodies before yet more hills took us over towards a camp beside the river in Selkirk. Quiet roads and trails took us up the Tweed Valley to Peebles and a final clump of hills before we dropped down into Edinburgh. And it was here we joined the canal route that would take us across to Glasgow, around 60 miles on off-road trails that were all tarmacked and gave very good going, almost level going in fact, and we blitzed it across to the more industrial city in the west, Glasgow. Just 9 miles from Glasgow city centre, we had our final camp just beside the towpath. It was a lovely spot with good views over to the neighbouring hills. Trish navigated us to the railway station and we managed to get the first train south, and we were soon chugging our way through lovely country back to our own hilly country in the Howgill Fells. And what a lovely tour we'd had, 440 miles with around about 31,000 feet of ascent. A brilliant trip.